Hello and welcome to another episode of Thick Slices and Deep Cuts. On this evening's show, we're going to be doing a 3-pack. Just filmed a pizza episode where we did the Halloween theme, so not quite doing the Halloween theme this go around, but I did want to make sure that we kind of stayed on the darker end of the spectrum. So no 70s prog rock here. It's definitely going to be darker, heavier bands, and you've already probably seen the 3 bands that I'm going to be covering here just based on the heading, but we're going to be starting with ALKALOID. Awesome band out of Germany. Also ENSLAVED, classic black metal from Norway. And then we're going to finish it off with TRIPTYKON, classic, Tom Warrior Company, and we'll get into that too, based out of Switzerland. So 3 bands here, all pretty dark, based out of different countries. So we will go ahead and get going here. And start with the first band. My first band tonight is ALKALOID. If you can hear it, we're listening to the opening track from the album that just came out last month. I think it's pronounced Clyphosis. So advanced, even for 2023. Numen is the album, N-U-M-E-N. It's like an all-star band project that sounds like it's more than an all-star band. It's a legit, fully functioning band at this point. What cool packaging on this. 2 discs, tons of cool imagery. You've got Maurian on vocals. He was in, I knew him already before this band even existed. I knew of a band, Dark Fortress, out of Munich, or Bavaria. Munich, Bavaria, Germany. Very dark. Ilem and Venereal Dawn. These are really good. They've got a couple of other ones with Maurian on vocals. He stepped in, I think they did 8 albums total. Did some festivals earlier this year and then called it a day. He was on the last 4 of the 8 albums, which, from what I can hear, those are the ones I got into. Just really creative black metal, but had that good dark atmosphere, but it was just different from all the Scandinavian black metal bands. Definitely good songwriting too. Had just put together the songs well. You actually can kind of remember the hooks and the choruses and things like that. But so Maurian comes out of there and becomes the vocalist. I think he plays guitars in this band still. One of many who play guitars. In this band, which was a 5-piece in the beginning, now there are 4. They lost Danny Tunker, was like their 3rd guitarist. And Maurian, by the way, this guy is, I believe he lives in Rotterdam in the Netherlands now, and he's a classical composer. So he's making symphonies. So this is what he does for fun when he's not doing that. Highly complicated music. The lyrical content just blows your mind with all the Dyson Sphere stuff, the nods to H.P. Lovecraft, and just all of the thoughts of what's beyond this galaxy, or at least what's in the far reaches of our own galaxy that we don't even know about. And Hannes Grossman, the drummer, absolutely insane. He writes a lot of the music. Maurian writes a lot of it. Christian Munzner writes a little bit. I think Linus Klitzenauzer, I saw his name on some songwriting credits. Even Danny Tunker, who's no longer in the band on this album, I think he was involved in this a little bit, and was definitely involved in these 2. The first one, which I got back in 2015, blew me away back then, so 8 years ago. These guys blew me away with this one, and followed up with Liquid Anatomy in 2018, which was really good as well. But this is hands down their best one, and the reason I have ALKALOID as part of the 3-pack, when you only have 3 albums, it's tough to do an album ranking that's solely on one band. But this is definitely a number 1. This might be my number 2 just because I have good memories of this, although this might even be more sophisticated. But this is clearly their best thing to date. I'm blown away by this album. But I mentioned that Dark Fortress, based out of Munich, Germany, and but also, I did an album ranking on Obscura, but Christian Munzner and Hannes Grossman and Linus Klitzenauzer were all in Obscura at one point in time. Now they're all in ALKALOID. Christian Munzner is back in Obscura and has done an album with them more recently. So he is in both Alkaloid and Obscura. That's pretty awesome. I'd be bragging all day long if I was in both of these bands. Because to me, of the Bavarian scene and pretty much of the German scene in general, for my money, these are my favorite bands to listen to, and I really enjoy Dark Fortress. You know, rest in peace, Dark Fortress. But they have good music, and if you haven't heard them, they've got 8 albums. They've got 4 with Morian, and the 4 with Morian are really, you know, they stepped it up to another level. They kind of expanded their sound when he joined the band a little bit. So, Alkaloid, just an incredibly cool band. Again, perfect for the 3-pack. I wanted to talk about them. I don't know how well known they are. Hopefully this album gets them kind of propelled into people being aware of who they are, because they're really... it's hard to find music that blows me away on the technical complexity level anymore, because we've heard so much of it, but they still I'm just utterly impressed with the drumming, the musicianship all across the board, the unexpected melodies or atonal melodies or whatever you want to call them that they mix in, just keep you off balance to some extent. And when you've got 4 or 5 guys writing and contributing, you get different styles throughout the albums. It's just a really cool album. So that might do it for Alkaloid. I'm trying to think if there's anything else to add to them other than I'm really digging this album. All 3 of their albums so far, just absolutely great. Dark Fortress, again, if you haven't heard them, Orient's great. Obscura did Illegimitation. It was like a hodgepodge of stuff and covers. And on that particular album, the covers that they do of Cynic, Atheist, and Death has Linus Klitzenautzer's bass for the first time with Obscura. He's on that recording along with Hannes Grossman and Christian Munzner. So those 3 covers have 3/4 of Alkaloid on it. He would stay in Obscura for a while. Christian Munzner is back in Obscura, and Hannes Grossman was there for these 2. Also on this, Morian has a guest appearance. I think it's called Velocity, is the song he's on. So this is really cool. You've got a lot of guys in Alkaloid that are mixing in with earlier Obscura stuff. So there you go. I think that for the most part covers it, but Obscura, we'll at least hear this opening riff here, because they've got this good, like, classic Morbid Angel, maybe Deliverance era Opeth, kind of death metal. And they use the 7 strings. I'm a 7-string fan. I kind of came up in that era where it was a new thing. You know, I think Morbid Angel, I think the first time I ever saw a 7-string or extended range guitar was either the God of Emptiness video, which some of their songs like Cthulhu sounds a little bit like that. But, you know, even Dream Theater, when they came out with that song Lie or Awake, he was using 7 strings. So I kind of came up in that era. So these guys use the 7s a lot. Very cool. But there you go. That will do it for our first band of the night, Alkaloid. And I know I have newer technology to do this stuff, but I'm still going to keep it pretty old school, kind of analog, and do the finger snap when we switch. But if you can hear this, I got to hear this riff before we get out of here. I hope you guys can hear that, because I love this. Yeah, all right. So on that note, we will be right back with our second band of the night. Hello, and we are back with our second band of the night, a Viking Horn. And we're on to Bergen, Norway's black metal classic band Enslaved. And this is a Behind the Mirror track 1 from the newest album. Yeah. And again, Enslaved, they have a ton of albums. I don't know if it's 15 or 16 or whatever the actual count is at this point. You would think that I would have everything they've owned and be ready to do a ranking from the beginning to the current. But I'll be honest, I never really dug into them until this album, E. And they've been experimenting for about 20 years now. You know, they were basically one of the original like Viking bands, Viking metal bands. I know Bathory was literally first, but not long after Bathory started doing it, you had a few other bands. My first introduction to anything Viking related was Unleashed. Across the Open Sea. I remember having that on cassette. It had that Viking boat on the cover, and they were talking about like Viking lore, and that was kind of my first introduction to it. And that was coming from a band that was kind of doing the death metal, stripped down death metal thing back in the early 90s, the classic era. And I know Bathory came out of the black metal realm, and Enslaved come out of that black metal realm too. And a lot of, I've heard Enslaved is like the black metal Opeth, where they are black metal, but they've evolved into progressive and experimental, and they're willing to try anything. Some things that work better than others. But one thing that Enslaved do that Opeth does not is they've maintained a core black metal sound all these years later. So even if they're experimenting, you're still going to get Grootla's excellent black metal vocal. And I've got a, you know, ironically, I'm not as big of a, it's not that I'm not a fan of black metal, I don't have nearly as many bands that I follow in this genre than I do in, like, I guess death metal or, you know, whatever, progressive metal, thrash, whatever it is. I mean, I like probably, I could probably pull out a dozen bands, but it's a fraction of some of these other things. But the thing I like about Enslaved, and you can hear it here, here's the experimentation, is that they stand out from the pack. They have their own thing going on, carved out, and that's what I'm really looking for in these bands, is something that you like, but something that's creative and unique. And they definitely stand out from the pack. And this latest album, Heimdall, is great. It's going to be in my top 10 for the best albums of 2023 for sure. And Utgard is excellent. And they got a new keyboard player, and E was the first one I listened to. I love this album. This is what kind of got me hooked on them, you know, in the here and now and moving forward. I kind of picked up here, and this is when this new kid keyboard player joined the band. And I think they have a new drummer for the last 2 albums. So they're kind of in a new phase. So these last 3 albums, I did recently go out and get a used copy of In Times, which is the album before E. And this is good too, but I don't claim to know it inside and out. And but it's easier to it's complicated, but easier to digest than, say, Utgard or some of this even more insanely experimental stuff. But I like this too. I think it's RIITIIR, that album. For this, I need to go get that. And I think I'm just going to continue to work backwards all the way to Isa, and if it's still sounding good, I'll just keep going all the way back to those beginning Viking albums from the earlier, I guess from the mid-90s, when Ivar Bjornsson, the guitar player, and Grootla formed the band in Bergen, which, you know, in doing more research on the black metal scene, Bergen seems like the real capital for black metal, which we will say Norway is the country capital for black metal, but I think even more specifically Bergen, which is up on the coast, even further north, even grayer. Just it really seems like a perfect spot for this music to kind of, you know, get going. And, you know, Fen, they're from England. I love those guys. Again, they're black metal, but they have their own kind of niche going. Alsace out of France, they got, yeah, definitely their own thing going on. They're barely even black metal at this point. But, you know, I was thinking about doing a 3-pack with all Norwegian bands, but I don't know enough about Ulver beyond. I watched a horror movie called Sinister, and it had their glitchy stuff in there. Excerpts, the silence teaches you how to sing stuff, which haunted the crap out of me. And so I got that, and then I got this video, which is very just avant-garde to say the least. But I don't know much about their earliest works, which were pure black metal, and then they kind of got into this electronica stuff. So they're kind of hit and miss for me, but I appreciate Christopher Rigg's approach to just breaking all the boundaries. But are they even considered black metal? Like, I don't even know. And then you don't have to be into black metal. Everybody, it seemed 20 years ago, had this. Death Called Armageddon by Dimmu Borgir, another band out of Oslo, Norway. They just had that Progenies of the Great Apocalypse video. It just blew me away back in the day. It was so ahead of its time. It was musical. You know, it had musicality, great production, the whole 9 yards, good video. But beyond, and then the album after this, a re-recording of an early album is really cool. But that is my extent of a lot of the Norwegian black metal. You know, Dissection, I got a poster, but that's like black and death metal. Dark Throne, some of the early Dark Throne's pretty cool. In fact, they were doing the death metal thing in Sunlight Studio over in Sweden for that first album. But yeah, Enslaved, again, maybe someday I'll do what I'm thinking about, kicking around an idea of doing redux versions of some of the album rankings. Like, just some of the artists I did way back in the beginning, and since then they've released an album or two, or my opinions have changed, or you know, maybe like to, you know, do a new ranking and not watch the old one and see how the rankings compare. But if I wouldn't be shocked if someday I do a redux ranking of Enslaved and try and cover all their stuff. But hard to know. I think this is their best album. It's their most recent. That's high praise for a band that's put out a lot of albums. We're listening to Hindsight from E, which I love. Very progressive. Really good. And Utgard's great as well. So it's just impossible to rank. And again, when you're really only familiar with 3 of the albums, you're not going to try and tackle 15, 16 albums. Act like you know what you're talking about. But big fan of Enslaved. Glad I finally was able to speak about them on this show. Same thing with Alkaloid. But so there we have it. I think that's going to cover it for Enslaved. Like I said, maybe a year from now when I keep checking out, you know, get this one figured out, listen to the one before it, keep going back and back and back. Might try and do a full album ranking of Enslaved. So there you go. We will wrap it up here for Enslaved, and we'll come right back with our third and final band of the show. Okay, and we're back. Third and final band of the night, coming out of Switzerland, known as TRIPTYKON, but basically you'll know them better as Celtic Frost or even Hellhammer, because this is all about Tom Warrior and his vision that he's had for over 40 years now. You know, you can change the name, but it all feels like it's connected. Hellhammer fed right into Morbid Tales and Celtic Frost. And after the hiatus for Celtic Frost of 90 to 06, 16 years between albums, they come out with this incredible album, Monotheist. And TRIPTYKON, if you like this album, TRIPTYKON is just picking up where Monotheist leaves off. I hope I can pronounce these. This is the lead-off track from Aparastara Diamones. And this is Geisha. And that's H.R. Geiger or H.R. Giger artwork there. Great. The thing I've always loved about TRIPTYKON, Celtic Frost, Hellhammer, very primitive, very primal. It's not really about musicianship, whereas Alkaloid is all about musicianship in some of these bands. You could be, you know, you could play this with your eyes closed as long as you have a feeling and an emotion. A lot of the riffs are single note riffs on the guitar, down tune. And so they carry this on. The blueprint that was set all those years, but also the, if I can find, yeah, the blueprint that was set on Monotheist carries on for TRIPTYKON. I did an episode on Hellhammer, did an episode on Celtic Frost. So primal. Single note. I love how crude Hellhammer and like Morbid Tales any of that stuff really, but I always love how crude it sounds. They had an interview with Tom Warrior, and they were like, "How did you come up with the sound?" And he's like, "I don't know if we came up with it. We were in Switzerland. There was no music scene or nobody doing this kind of music. We were isolated, and they came up with this really dark, chromatic music, just kind of based on the fact that they were so isolated from everything else that was going on. So I think that isolation actually helped them figure out their sound. But if we get there, I've got a song stuck on the end here, Milana Kazmata, The Sleep of Death. I don't know if we'll get to it because this song's really long, but I don't know the big difference between these other than a 4-year gap from 2010 to 2014. Oh, also, this Shatter EP was from the original sessions of the first album. And there's TRIPTYKON's logo with that Celtic Frost alternate logo stuff. But Shatter's a cool song. Aurora, the videos for these songs, they've got these like a little bit of a gothic touch, and I hear it. The background music for our pizza show was Typo Negative, and I know they're a gothic kind of Halloween band, but every once in a while when TRIPTYKON isn't going completely barbaric and dark, they kind of have that dark gothic, like a slight Typo Negative thing, which I really dig. They've got female bass player. I don't know if she's that vocalist, but they got kind of that haunting female vocal that pops in here and there with a little bit of synthesizer. So that's cool. And also to tie all of this in, you know, Bavaria, southern Germany, is not all that far from Switzerland. And we talked about the band Dark Fortress. V. Santura, who has his own recording studio, is the guitar player and helps, you know, probably write some of the music for these albums too. So small world, and that's why I wanted to include TRIPTYKON. I'm glad that Tom Warrior changed the band name. You know, he's got 3 different band names for basically the same thing, because it gives me a chance to talk about his music 3 different times. He could easily have just had Celtic Frost back in 82, 83, and just ridden it all the way to the present, but he broke it into Hellhammer, Celtic Frost, and TRIPTYKON. But the guitar player is the guitarist and recording engineer, producer for Dark Fortress. So small world there. And the drummer on top of that, nowadays, is Hannes Grossman, the drummer for ALKALOID, and formerly of Obscura. So they bring in the most talented technical drummer to basically say, hey, just keep it simple. In fact, if you're a little sloppy, we don't want to play to a click. So if you're a little sloppy, that's even better, because we want it to be rude and crude and pummeling and dark. So they're basically, it's hard to believe that Hannes Grossman is playing the anti-ALKALOID type music, the slower, the cruder, but barbarically heavy stuff. So I think that covers it, but just a huge fan of Celtic Frost. I think the element they brought is as important as anything Slayer brought, or I don't want to talk about the band that starts with the letter M that we talk about too much, but I think if you listen to Slayer and Celtic Frost in the beginning, that's when I hear Creator's Pleasure to Kill, I would just wonder if they were listening to, you know, 2 Megatherion and, you know, Haunt Hell Awaits, and then they just went in the studio and cranked out that awesome album. But I think that covers it, and again, just an excuse to talk about Tom Warrior and company a 3rd time. And they do have a live album out that has like a 28-minute song in the middle that completes this trilogy, which has a song, Requiem, which finishes it. No, I guess that opens it. Requiem from Into the Pandemonium opens it. And then there's a song from Monotheist, it's the last track, Winter. I guess is the 3rd and final part, but in the middle there's a part 2 that they created, and you can only find it live. It's like 28 minutes. And I haven't listened to that enough, other than like once or twice, but Hannes Grossman's the drummer on that, and I could have sworn I heard that they have an album coming out in 2024, and I hope they tour in support of that, so I'm excited for that as well. So there you go. That's talking about 3 darker bands here as we get closer and closer to Halloween. And again, I've been wanting to talk about Enslaved for a while, so I'm glad I got them in here. Alkaloid needs more recognition, and TRIPTYKON is as good as, yeah, they're a continuation of the Celtic Frost legacy. So, so there you go. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.